Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We are embarking on a truly massive, multidisciplinary journey today, diving deep into the work of Kyle McLean Smith. We're going to be spanning everything from mundane Ontario copyright disputes all the way up to the advanced geometry powering artificial intelligence. It's an absolutely fascinating look at how human creation is fundamentally at odds with the architecture of the modern digital world, and, more importantly, how one researcher proposes we actually fix it. Okay, let's dive right into this. To really grasp the core stakes of this explainer, we have to look at this quote from the legendary Jimi Hendrix. "And so castles made of sand fall in the sea eventually." Smith uses this exact metaphor to frame a monumental battle that is happening right now. It's the battle between human creative effort, which is your castle, and the thermodynamic dissolving noise of the digital age, the sand. In this framework, human effort is intentional, it has structure. Meanwhile, the digital space, especially under modern generative AI, acts like a rising tide that is constantly trying to wash that structure away. So here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover copyright in cyberspace, the royalist AI threat, the mathematical flaw, the geometric solution, metabolic dithering, and finally, the sovereign digital future. Let's get to it. Kicking things off with Section 1, Copyright in Cyberspace. To really understand Smith's technological solutions, we first have to look at his legal foundation. The internet fundamentally changed how duplication works. For the literal first time in human history, laypersons could independently infringe on copyrights on a massive, worldwide scale without needing, say, a printing press or a giant record plant. Cyberspace basically allowed individuals to bypass the rule of law entirely. Smith calls this systematic liquidation of art, which really started around the time of Napster, a metabolic strike against creators. And honestly, the judiciary just hasn't had the structural tools to keep up with it. And that brings us to Section 2, the royalist AI threat. Now here, Smith shifts gears a bit from law into sociology. On one side of the ring, we have the sovereign pilot. That's you, the decentralized human creator grounded in common law and biological lineage. On the other side, though, is the agentic king, or the oracle. This is centralized modern AI. It acts as a sort of digital dictator, functioning as a centralized mainframe that generates synthetic statutes and rules. It completely obscures original human labor behind closed systems, basically claiming absolute authority over human value. So what is really at stake here? What this AI threatens is a concept called hackacity. It's a great word. It refers to the absolute thisness or the irreversible footprint of an author's expression. Think of the undeniable, incredibly unique way Jimi Hendrix played the guitar. You cannot sever that thisness from his actual personhood. But generative AI attempts to do exactly that, to ingest human expression and sever it entirely from the creator. When that happens, a structured, sovereign castle is ground down into eugenic, ownerless sand. Which leads us to Section 3, the mathematical flaw. Now you might be wondering, wait, why are we jumping from law and sociology straight into math? Well, Smith argues that the root of this enclosure isn't just bad policy, it's a structural flaw baked right into AI itself. He calls it the trig wall. Modern large language models rely heavily on continuous, irrational math, things like sine and cosine. Because these functions are infinite, computers have to round them off billions of times. And this creates what we call drift. The exact, precise location of the original data is permanently lost, which inherently blurs and destroys the unique thisness of human creation. The consequence of this math is what Smith calls a thermodynamic heat sink inside the AI's latent space. Because the math is continuous and completely based on probability, it acts just like entropy. The unique metabolic strikes of an individual creator are literally liquefied into recursive probability data. The machine digests the castle, and all that's left is a swirling, chaotic field of thermodynamic sand. So, how on earth do we fix it? Let's look at Section 4, the geometric solution. Smith's answer is to simply bypass that trig wall entirely. Instead of using circles and infinite decimals like pi, his framework uses something called the Cayley-Ferry bridge. This maps data using simple Pythagorean right triangles. Yeah, think of your classic 3, 4, 5 triangles from high school math. By fixing one side of the triangle to a whole number, he transforms a drifting, continuous space into a rigid, rational grid. There is zero rounding, there are zero approximations. It creates an unbreakable mathematical boundary with an exact, perfect address for every piece of data. And get this, there is a massive physical benefit to this shift too, 0.05. By moving away from continuous heavy math to these discrete one-bit integer clicks, The system hits a bit-perfect metabolic energy floor of 0.05 picojoules per operation. To put that into perspective, when you compare it to standard floating point operations in modern AI, this represents an absolutely astonishing reduction in the energy required to process information. It's mathematically perfect, and it is metabolically hyper-efficient. All right, let's see how this actually applies to media in Section 5, metabolic dithering. Okay, so before any of this geometric protection kicks in, raw continuous data just sort of sits on what Smith calls the Shannon floor of noise. It's essentially stochastic, undifferentiated gunk. The data is entirely unanchored. It's practically sand just waiting to be washed away by the tide. But as this exact mathematical geometry is applied, the data begins to lock into a rational grid. Through discrete thresholds, all that chaotic noise is forced into distinct, mathematically verifiable one-bit events. The structure of the castle is literally beginning to form right out of the noise. And finally, the data reaches absolute clarity. By packing these one-bit events into this Pythagorean lattice, you create a flawless, unbreakable digital ledger. Every single pixel is tied to an exact integer. That means it cannot drift, and it cannot be quietly absorbed by an AI without completely breaking the mathematical proof. Which brings us perfectly to our final part today. Section 6, the sovereign digital future. This is the moment where the math truly meets the law. Smith's overarching conclusion culminates in the A1S8C8 protocol. That name is actually a direct reference to the U.S. Constitution's copyright clause. Using his geometric proofs, Smith proposes a protocol that anchors copyright as an inalienable right, baked directly into the math of the file itself. It demands local node execution, meaning true sovereignty stays with you, the user. It legally and mathematically shields human effort from AI liquidation, ensuring that digital value remains an emergent property of witnessed, irreversible human effort. It's honestly a profound way to look at the intersection of technology, the law, and our own humanity. As we move further and further into the age of generative AI, the structures we rely on are absolutely going to be tested. So I want to leave you with this final vital question. By relying on the shifting, continuous drift of centralized systems, are we willingly surrendering our hackasiety? Will your digital legacy be a mathematically unbreakable castle, or will it simply be washed away as sand? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.